Welcome to the Mark Divine Show. This podcast is about more than just listening. It's about sparking action and inspiration while transforming yourself, your community, and the world at large. Each episode is designed to help you grow as a leader, break through personal barriers, and make lasting impact. Together, you and your host will explore topics like mental toughness, emotional resilience, purpose, and evolving consciousness, while embracing challenges and facing this fast-changing world. Our guests on the Mark Divine Show are exceptional individuals who offer wisdom from diverse fields, whether it's science, philosophy, leadership, human performance, or psychedelic research. Join us today as we dare to think bigger, live bolder, and unlock the common potential within everyone. Here's your host, Mark Divine.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Anyway, this is baked into my psyche, and now our whole community, you know, they say it.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
There's a whole bunch of onomatopoeia going on with that too. You know, that there's a real reason it's hoo-yah as opposed to like
hoorah.
Erudite. The call is not erudite.
Right.
It's hoo-yah. There's
it's funny you say that.
Specific reasons why.
I exactly said, I actually have critiqued the Army's version is hoo-ah. And hoo-ah is actually kind of diminishes you as you say it. Hoo-ah.
Yeah.
And the Marine version is ooh-rah, which is also kind of a weak, because you can't project the ooh.
Yeah.
So the SEALs are wise. They're warriors. So it's more like if you think about a karate ki, who comes from the belly.
Yeah.
And then ya is like an arrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can pierce someone with that.
There's a bunch of things happening with your mouth and your breath, too, to achieve those sounds that makes your call better than the other two. Even the ya, because it forces your mouth to open much more on that extended syllable. Right. That voiced vowel, ya, like so. Like all of that is opening, expanding the body, and forcing more breath and more voice out of you, as opposed to, I mean, if we go really far, like I used erudite because it's such a tight little sound, but even theirs are a little bit worse than the call that you all do.
Right.
So whether you landed on that instinctually or how it developed, but it's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Not that you need my validation on that.
I don't think
it's a good call.
There'd be
good job.
no way to trace their roots. It's just lost in history of the SEALs. Part of it was just wanting to be different.
Yeah.
Right? You know, we're not going to do what the Marines are going to do or what the Army does.
Right, right.
The SEALs are a relatively new organization. And relatively speaking, 63 they were formed.
Wow.
By John F. Kennedy. And but because it was such a small unit and the guys were so creative that they came up with a lot of the the cultural stuff was new.
Yeah.
Right. So they developed it, and they needed to develop a culture that was distinct from the big Navy because what they were doing was very, very unique.
Yeah.
And so this idea, but a lot of the guys attracted were were warriors, like they were martial artists and wrestlers.
Of course.
And so they understood this notion of power projection and how energy gets stored in the belly. And so like that's why the who comes.
Yeah.
Deep from the belly, from the power source. And then like you said, the ya. Well, I've noticed with my clientele that it does need to be practiced. So first introduce it, I get a lot of like hoo ya.
Of course.
They trap the energy up here.
Yeah.
Hoo ya.
Yeah.
So we have to then get into breathing exercises, which then opens up, the airway, gives them that hoo ya. So we'll combine the sound with movement. So like a squat. Drop down, inhale, stand up, hoo-yah.
Yeah.
And so now we've got the movement. So I think there's probably a lot of overlap with some of the exercises that you do.
A ton.
Yeah. I'm sure there's several, but can you tell us what like the biggest mistake that people make with communication?
It's related to what I hope is the biggest aha moment people have from this book. And for you specifically.
The biggest hoo-yah moment. You mean.
Yeah, exactly. Hoo-yah, yes, exactly. And I hope for you even that communication is completely tied to every single thing that you're most interested in the work that you do. And here's why. People have this tremendous misconception of what communication actually is. We have this idea that if I think smart thoughts, I'm going to magically say smart thoughts. Almost like I am a PDF. I'm going to share a piece of thought leadership with you. And it completely misses the point that communication is a physical act. It's almost a physical discipline. It's closer to a sport or a dance or, yes, a martial art or fighting discipline than it is just thinking. Because we take air into our bodies. In order for that to happen, the diaphragm has to drop down. The rib cage has to expand to allow the lungs to have room to fill with air. You expel that air, it flows over your vocal cords, and that's where it picks up sound. And then the sound gets amplified and altered coming out of your mouth with this miraculous act of enunciation we all do all day long and never think about it.
Yeah,
it
as
is
you
a physical activity.
Michael, I'm just marveling over the complexity of formulating a sentence.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yes.
Right? To think that the air vibrating on the vocal cords and then kind of contorted by our tongue and our lips and our face.
Yes.
And also the way we're modulating the air coming out. It's pretty extraordinary when you really pay attention to it, like how much is involved in it.
Yeah. I call speaking an everyday miracle.
Right.
Because it is. You're right. The phenomenal act of coordination that is unlocked as we do this, it's incredible. And the mixture of large muscle groups and tiny, small muscle groups, the precision of enunciation, what our tongue and our lips and our jaw and our soft palate all have to do to form words, it's incredible. But people don't know that.
So
they
the
just think
biggest
of it as
mistake
thinking.
is just to take it for granted.
Well, the biggest mistake is to remain only in the cognitive.
Right.
So essentially, you perform badly, and then what you do is you beat yourself up and say, like, God, I've got to study my stuff better next time. I have to anticipate that question. How could I not thought of that? Or, oh, I've got to make sure I say this thing, remember that thing. And we retreat into this whole like cognitive, obsessive place. And if we performed badly, what I see a lot is people even dip into some kind of shame cycle and self-critique. It's not.
And we know that's not very helpful.
Not helpful at all, no. And it's a physical activity. It's closer to exercising. So as opposed to that whole silly shame loop, instead, learn physical practices to communicate much, much better. Practice them and like an athlete, train, and you'll be better in 3 months, 6 months.
I agree with that. I want to really dig into a lot of these exercises, but just kind of my own experience with speeches. I used to use PowerPoints. I think, everyone expected them, right? It's a little bit of eye candy.
Yeah.
And at least I was smart enough not to read the PowerPoint slides, but to use it as a guide.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it really constrained me, right? I felt like I had to then kind of contract myself into like this actual square presentation, and my voice kind of went through the presentation to the crowd. And so it disconnected me from the audience.
Yeah.
So I stopped using them and also started telling stories. That's the other thing. It's really hard to do effective storytelling when you're using a prop like a PowerPoint. Because again, you're engaging with the concept as opposed to the embodiment of the story. So I stopped using PowerPoints and I started to do exactly what you're saying, is like tell the story with my body, right? So like if I say, oh yeah, I was on day 1 of Bud's training and the instructor said, hit the surf. And I'm on stage, I'm like I turn around and I start running, right? So they get this visceral image, like I'm running toward the surf. And then I stop and I look back looking for my friend, like, where are you, Bill?
Yeah.
And Bill's running to ring the bell, right? And this is all leading into a story about like, why did he quit? And why was I having fun?
Yeah.
At that very same moment. Same moment, same stimulus, different response, mentally and emotionally. Anyways, what I found is my speech is just dramatically improved. Like not incrementally, but exponentially.
Yeah.
And that the audience, because the movement and the dynamic nature of the storytelling, the audience couldn't take their eyes off of me.
Yeah.
So they became really engaged.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I think we're onto something. So that's like one of my most important takeaways is exactly what you just started with. This whole conversation is that communicating is a body art.
Yes. Yes.
It's a body art.
That's right.
And you just related it to like dance or Tai Chi or Qigong. That's cool.
And just like all those same things, the better, the more economically, efficiently, fluidly that you use the physical communication instrument that is your body, the better your communication.
Right.
So it's a different way of approaching this that helps people realize, oh my gosh, I can train in this. I can get better. With a little bit of dedicated work, I can dramatically, to your point, to your experience, I can exponentially improve. And I can get out of, if I have some sort of negative tape in my head that I've been playing for 30 years, I talk too fast, I go on too long, I bore people, whatever this thing is, you can get out of it like that if you do the right approach to training, which, of course, that's the entire point of this book, is to give people tangible things that they can do differently. Your story is an amazing one for a variety of reasons. I want to push back on a couple little concepts, though.
Sure.
Yes, PowerPoint is deadly boring. Yes, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
So when you say PowerPoint, probably what that means is the slides had some verbiage on there, some words, some charts, that kind of stuff. No one says, though, that the PowerPoint could not be
just
a picture of you in a cold bath after 90 minutes or a image or a video. It is another way to stimulate people's senses. But we use it in dreadfully boring ways all the time. Now, trust me, I know this because I coach in legal and finance and pharma, and trust me, those slides.
Put yourself to sleep slides.
Yeah, for sure.
I totally agree with that. So if I do use slides, they're just images now.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's an art too, to like really make sure that your imagery is going to fit with the flow of your speech, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit more free form, so I have, that even can constrain me. Where I'm trying to advance a slide to make sure that the image, is matching the story at the appropriate place.
Sure.
So I got a little work to do in that category.
Well, but I'm also not suggesting one needs PowerPoint. I'm not even suggesting if you use a bunch of images that it's better than having no PowerPoint and just telling stories.
Right.
I'm simply suggesting for those of you who are listening out there, to say like, I have to use slides. Okay, fine. Use better slides. Right. Make it more sensory for your audience. But the even more interesting thing about the story you told is that if people are watching clips of this, they're just listening most likely. But if you are watching, what you would see is when you began to move your body dynamically, retelling this story, your voice changed dramatically. And you can even feel this for a second. If you pound in your chest for a second, and of course the audience can now hear this, and I say, my voice is my body. If I plug my nose, the sound of my voice changes. When I say, my voice is my body, we're musical instruments. So when you begin to move your body in a profoundly different way, as you do when you tell that story,
comes out different,
completely different. The same thing, though. If you stuck a mute in a trumpet, the sound of the trumpet doesn't, it wouldn't shock anyone that it changes. Of course it would change. But we forget that we are musical instruments. So this is why I'm excited for this conversation, because this is entirely in line with your work.
For sure.
And if your audience that is so already attuned to the idea that how you build the physical habits of your day can dramatically improve your life, it's the exact same thing for communication. And most folks don't teach communication that way.
Yeah, I'd love to come up with by the end of this, a simple protocol that someone can add to their exercise routine. Like, I'm going to go work out.
Yeah.
And as part of their workout, we're doing 3 or 4 things that are going to improve my communication style.
Not just that, but if people read the book and they don't do that, they have not taken the lessons of the book. Because literally chapter 19 is called Making It Stick, Building Your Communication Regimen.
Right.
And it's all about that. A little warm up at the beginning of the day, and then a few exercises that you practice to build a different kind of muscle memory.
Right.
So that over time, 3 months, you have a different habit, a different pattern. 3 years of doing it, you're a different communicator.
That's interesting. Stoked to have Bird Dogs as a sponsor of the Mark Divine Show. I value performance and style and the ability to move in the clothing that I wear. And that's why I think Bird Dogs are a game changer. Unlike most of the clothes that I have, which are stiff and restrictive, Bird Dogs stretch khakis are incredibly comfortable and versatile. I can crank out burpees with them or wear them out to a nice dinner. They're perfect for anyone like me who wants to look polished and not sacrifice comfort. and be ready to move. Another one of their standout pieces is their quarter zip. Fabric is incredibly soft, and they've got a built-in liner, which adds comfort and warmth. This is another thing you can wear to a casual lunch or even to a more formal event. And it's really nice to have that on a cool day to keep me toasty warm. At any rate, check them out. I think you'll find them as exceptional as I do. They've got a special offer for the Mark Divine Show. For a limited time, you can get a completely free hat with any order from Bird Dogs. Just use the code DIVINE at birddogs.com. It's a great opportunity to experience Bird Dogs quality firsthand. I highly recommend them. Again, head over to birddogs.com, birddogs.com. Use the code DIVINE, DIVINE, for that free hat. Your support means a lot to us, so be sure to let them know that we sent you. Catch you next time. Hoo-yah. Thanks, Bird Dogs. You know, running an online business can be a bit overwhelming. There's a lot going on. I've had to learn so much SEO to web design. And of course, my team is always trying to stay up on the latest and greatest. One thing that's always given us headaches is the hosting. We've dealt with slow speeds, security breaches, outdated dashboards. All of that wants to make me pull my hair out. But then I discovered Kinsta, which solved our hosting nightmares. Their managed WordPress hosting is a game changer. It's like having a team of experts handling all the tech stuff so that I can focus on what matters most, which is growing my business. With Kinsta, we get blazing speeds that boost my SEO and traffic. They've got enterprise-level security, which gives me peace of mind knowing that my site is protected. And they've got a great dashboard. It's intuitive and modern. I used to worry about traffic spikes, but with Kinsta, I'm confident my site can handle it. Plus, if I need some help, I actually talk to humans, not AI chatbots. They respond in minutes and solve even the toughest of issues easily. Kinsta isn't just for small businesses either. They're trusted by over 120,000 businesses worldwide, including giants like TripAdvisor and NASA. And if you're worried about moving, they'll migrate your site for free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So imagine your site running at warp speed with ironclad security and reliability. If that sounds good to you, then consider switching to Kinsta, and you can get your first month free. They'll handle the migration, so you don't need to be a tech expert. Go to kinsta.com/mark to start today. KINSTA.com/mark. Let Kinsta handle the hosting so you can focus on what matters most. So don't say
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with the word
Nothing is so wrong with The title is a bit of a trick.
Okay.
And as soon as readers open the book, in the preface, the first thing they hear is that the title is a trick because it activates thought suppression. So that's the don't think of a pink elephant trick. So if I say don't think of a pink, right, exactly. That's what your brain goes to instantly. But we get and give ourselves this same thought suppression advice all the time. Don't make distracting hand gestures. Don't talk too fast. Don't maintain too much eye contact. It looks intense. Don't not make eye contact. All these don'ts, they just litter our focus while we're speaking. Mm-hmm. And what it ultimately does is it makes you more fixated on yourself than the person you're trying to reach.
Interesting.
But everyone knows in communication who's the most important person? The person we're trying to reach. Mm-hmm. So the title is supposed to resonate with people because they've heard it a million times. But as soon as they open the book, every single page is helping them figure out what to do rather than what to avoid. Mm-hmm. And filler is one of those things. And we can unpack it if you want to. Filler and ums and uhs and kind ofs, is that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. So my perception is that those, it's just unskillful communication and perhaps not a fully formulated thought, right? Maybe a partially formulated thought, then there's a pause and maybe like waiting for the brain to catch up to fill in the blanks of what's next.
Yeah.
So part of that is really kind of the preparation or, I guess I'm have to distinguish between like a formal speech versus just like communicating the way we are. And maybe just stylistically, right? Some people are more stream of conscious and other people are going to be more concise and precise with their languaging.
Yeah. I'm the last person in the world to dissuade anyone from preparation. But this is distinct from preparation in the following way. Yes, it's good that you can be very precise with your language when you do have the chance to prepare, but a lot of life is not prepared. It's impromptu. So you're on the right track with much of what you're saying. And for this one, let me just teach the exercise first, because it's the best way to unpack it. I actually did a spot on Good Morning America recently when I had the host walk on a balance beam, and that's the most fully realized version of this exercise, but you can do it just with your fingers. And the exercise in the chapter on what I call linguistic precision, which is essentially, are you choosing your words or are you just opening your mouth and letting words tumble out? I teach people to do an exercise called finger walking, and I'm doing it now, of course, if you're looking at this clip. But if you're just listening, what I'm doing is walking my fingers forward in space. You can do it on a desk or a table or the top of your leg. The goal is to force yourself to choose words. Step your fingers as specifically, as deliberately, as precisely as needed to choose every single word that comes out of your mouth. Now, as you do this, this is the antidote to thought suppression. It is the antidote to don't say because what it's forcing you to do is use embodied cognition, that's learning with your body, embodied cognition to actually choose language as opposed to just letting language tumble out of your mouth. So I like to say that filler language is a symptom, not a problem. To some of what you just said, it's a symptom of not really taking the time to consider what it is you want to say and being in charge of the words that you're creating to try to impact others in life. Now, I'm not the police. I'm not saying you can never say or kind of or you know. More interestingly for the audience, focus on the ratio of ums. And what I mean by that is this. If you say every 20 seconds when you're talking to a friend and you're trying to help the friend figure out some next steps in their life and you say every 20 seconds, fine. To your point earlier about vulnerability and humanity, sure, that's how you speak as you're navigating this incredible act of decision tree that is choosing one of the 15,000 words in your vocabulary. But here's a crucial thing. If in an interview or a presentation, all of a sudden you say every 3 seconds, well, that's not organic. That's not you. That's a habit you're shifting into in which all of a sudden you're more self-focused, not nearly as precise and not as mindful of the audience, and then your filler rate skyrockets. And those filler sounds are worth paying attention to.
What are some of the most common filler sounds?
Sure.
Those are the big ones. Sure.
It bounces around the world too, by the way. Really? So in Ireland, it's N. In Japan, it's oh. Yeah, exactly. And in France, it's because it really could be any word, actually, if it satisfies these two criteria. One, it's not grammatically necessary. And two, you're not aware you're doing it. So the hilarious example from the chapter is I one time coached a guy in the financial world, and he said the word viscerally practically every other sentence.
Really?
Yeah.
Viscerally.
Viscerally. And he had no idea he was doing it. It didn't fit in the sentence whatsoever at all.
He was
but it was
enamored with the word.
Yes, he was enamored with it. And it just became a crutch and a bit of filler that he would just throw in all the time into his sentence.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There's so many vectors we could take this, but I'm just going to just throw some stuff out because communication is so multifaceted. But what about vocal variety?
Yeah.
Like, we did this earlier, playing around with enunciation. Like you take one word and you can communicate it with a lot of different variety, a lot of different tonalities.
Yep.
And it might come off and actually have a different meaning and I even like with the tonality of how you end the word, like in an up, it's going to be more of a question. If it's a down, it's kind of a statement. So how do we really get a hold of variety and tonality?
Yeah. Let's look at this quite rigorously. So you said enunciation. Enunciation is totally distinct from vocal variety.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Enunciation is percussively how you shape sound into words.
Okay.
But vocal variety has to do with the musicality of the sound before it even gets enunciated.
Interesting.
It does change a little bit, because if you open your mouth more for enunciation, it affects how quickly you can speak and things like that. But for the purposes of most folks' improvement, it's better to think of the two things distinctly: enunciation, vocal variety. Vocal variety, humans use it, and we've been using it as long as we've been human. So I didn't invent that at all. I invented, though, a naming system to help people remember it. And this is useful to people: pace, pitch, pause, power, placement.
Pace, pitch, pause, power, placement. Okay.
Yeah, so I've made it
go through those.
P's, and it's alliterative. Exactly, 5 P's. So pace is speed. That's fast and slow. Pitch is high and low. High, low. Pause is just a musical rest, silence. Power is volume. I'll move back from the microphone for loud and soft. And placement means where the sound is placed in your body, where it amplifies the most in your body.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, what's fascinating, if we go back to your story about PowerPoint, and we listen to the first part when you were talking about what the delivery was like when you were using slides, your voice began to speak more about like this dynamic right here with almost no variation whatsoever. And then as soon as you talked about, and then I ran across the thing and the person shouted at me and they said, hey, all of a sudden your voice took on all this inflection and musicality. We do this quite naturally. When people get stressed, when they feel under pressure, self-focused, what they tend to do is contract. Because if you think of those 3 threat responses of fight, flight, or freeze, you can't fight anyone when giving a presentation. You can't flee the room. So what do? You freeze a little bit. And what that means is you contract, you breathe less, you open your mouth less, and all the variation in your voice goes away, and all of a sudden you're talking like that. So for most people, the journey is simply using more variation on all of those 5 Ps, and the fastest way to unlock that, again, is through a physical approach.
Give us some examples. Like, choose a sentence.
Yeah.
And vary up the 5 Ps.
Yeah, you got it. Hey, everybody, this is really easy. It's super easy. You know why? Because you already know how to do it. Don't even have to think about it.
Right.
Do this thought experiment. Some kid has grabbed your cell phone. Okay, they're 4, let's say, and you want your cell phone back. And all you have to trade is a wiffle ball or a stack of Post-it notes. Now, I want you to imagine yourself saying this sentence, and I'll do it in a monotone, so I'm not cheating. Listen. Do you want this thing or this thing? All right. Now, I want you to imagine yourself comparing these 2 objects, the cell phone and the wiffle ball, and how you would use your voice to make the wiffle ball seem much more attractive to the kid, to try to steal that phone back from them. And I promise you, you would change all of these 5 Ps: pace, pitch, pause, power, placement, all of them automatically. And you would never think, I'm focused on improving my communication because Michael Chad Hoeppner's book, Don't Say told me I should do so. You would just change them.
That reminds me, and that's what I was just checking. I had written down a statement about a year ago that was profoundly interesting to me that relates to this topic.
Yeah.
And it shows you how the emphasis on any particular word in a sentence will change the meaning of the sentence.
Yeah.
And this sentence, every single word, if you put an emphasis, it changes the meaning.
What's the sentence?
I never said she stole my money.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I never said she stole my money.
Somebody else did.
Somebody else did. I never said she stole my money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never said she stole my money.
That's right.
I never said she stole my money.
That's right.
I never said she stole my money.
She borrowed it.
I never said she stole my money.
That's right. She stole my money, not yours.
And I never said she stole my money.
That's right. She stole my car.
She stole something else. Isn't that? That's just genius.
Yeah, for sure. Imagine there's a litigator, right? And you are the witness on the stand. And the jury is going to think dramatically different things about what actually happened based on your vocal variety in that situation. You're right.
That's fascinating.
Now, that's because we use vocal variety to convey meaning. So this is not an optional thing. If you're listening to this, this is not about you having more drama or more flair. No, this is core. It's crucial, in fact. We use vocal variety to convey meaning, to convey emotion, to surprise our audience so they actually listen to what we're saying, and also to orient our audience. So this is not an optional thing. In order to be effective in your life as a communicator, you have to do this. And amazingly, you do it already when you're not thinking about it so much.
What's coming up to me right now is another kind of interesting kind of, I guess, communication gap. And this one, was in Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, and he talks about cognitive bias, right? And so, like if you're in a Native American, let's just say, and I said, I pulled up to the bank, right? You might be thinking, well, Mark was in a canoe and he pulled up to the riverbank.
Right.
Whereas I'm thinking I drove my car and stopped in front of the, banking institution.
Yeah.
So how do we ensure that context is conveyed or communicated effectively so that we don't have these major gaps?
You can divide communication into two buckets, spoken communication anyway. Two buckets. One is content, the other is delivery. Content is what you say. Delivery is everything else, how you say it. Vocal variety, enunciation, eye contact.
And the context, I guess, would fit into that because...
A little bit, but
kind of
context
back to
there
I never said she stole my money. The context is communicated by the emphasis on a particular word. Because otherwise it's a completely different meaning.
Yes, agreed. But the example you gave was actually about the meaning of the word bank to one audience versus to another. So their frame of reference is car. The other's is canoe. That actually is a reflection on the content, meaning the word choice.
I see, yeah.
But yes, you're right that delivery does convey a whole bunch of context and energy and, again, tone, emotion, surprise, etc. So what I would suggest is that if you're trying to make sure that you are understood, all the behaviors of delivery are crucial to understanding what your audience is perceiving and what you're trying to convey. Eye contact, we use this not to have good presence and to look into each other's souls. No, we have eye contact to see, is my message resonating?
Is it landing?
Yeah, that's right. And it's different for different people. I mean, neurodivergent audiences have slightly different relationship. Different cultures use eye contact differently. But in general, it's one tool that we leverage to see, did they understand that, danger is coming or not?
Yeah.
So yes to all those behavioral tools, and that will give you a lot of information about what your audience actually thinks or feels.
Right. One of the practices we use in Unbeatable Mind we just call it active listening. And it's kind of a misnomer because really what we're saying is mindfulness. It's like be present enough to clear your mind of formulating a response, of judging, of, classifying and trying to relate the information that's coming out of the other person's mouth to something that you know so that you can come back with something, pithy or whatever, which is the normal mode of communication for most people, right? They're not listening. They're actually in their head, they're probably collecting 5% of the information and 95% of what is going on is their formulation of some sort of positional response. So we try to get our clientele to just stop doing that. And that's a pretty incredible, hard and incredible transformation when you can just actually listen, fully present, and receive.
Yeah.
And the power that would have on the communication or the understanding, right, is pretty extraordinary. And I'm curious, does that, do you have any exercises that are similar to that or that you can kind of expound upon?
Yeah, I will help you with that coaching that you give to your clients right now, because the exercise in that chapter is called silent storytelling. It's amazing for what you're talking about. The way it works is this: you have to tell a story, but you don't get to use sound. So essentially you're mouthing the words and you're doing it as much as you can so that people could kind of read your lips, but you're also allowing your face to get in on the action and express how you feel about it. And also you use your hands.
Sounds like pantomime almost.
It's kind of like pantomime, exactly. But it's not so far as to be charade. So you're not counting off syllables on your arm or that kind of thing. No, you're just communicating as a heightened version of yourself from a physical communication perspective.
Okay.
Think of it like being muted on TV, where all the viewers should be able to read your lips. This is an incredibly powerful exercise for both doer and receiver.
I was going to say, the receiver is going to get the main benefits probably.
No, both.
Both.
Because the receiver, this is an incredible exercise to teach them how to do the very thing you're talking about.
Pay attention.
Yes. And pay attention to every darn moment, as opposed to the past, what was said so I can think of a great answer, or the future, or what I'm about to say to dazzle my audience or win the debate. No. What is the word they're forming right now? And I have to use all my powers of perception to figure that out. So it brings the listener into the present moment. But for the speaker, it unlocks all these incredible things. One, eye contact, because they have to look at their audience to see, are they mostly getting what I'm saying or not? Two, gestural ease and freedom, because all of a sudden their hands have a mission that is no longer, don't make distracting hand gestures. It's an active mission. Number three, when they put sound back into the equation, their voice, like you did when telling a story about blowing off your PowerPoint slides and just telling a story instead, their voice leaps out of their body because they're using their body in a much more dynamic way. But it's a very powerful exercise for both listener and or speaker and receiver.
Yeah. Michael, let's talk about how, let's say someone is disembodied. I don't mean that in a spiritual sense or, astral body sense. I mean, like they're just head up.
Yes.
And, a lot of people are that way, right?
Yeah.
Because of our health issues and people are not really connected to their body. How do we, from a communication perspective, what are some of the tools to get people back into their body to be more expressive and to be comfortable, not feel awkward about talking with their hands and using their body more in communication? Because it is so powerful.
The first thing I would suggest is that people should try to get an accurate perception to reality lens, because they're probably more or less disembodied in different situations. You even hear speakers in high-stakes situations describe this as it was like an out-of-body experience. So when people tend to be more stressed, more nervous, they tend to be more disembodied. And sometimes as they become more relaxed, more focused on the other person, they become more embodied. But you're right. Lots of folks are walking around from just the neck up. So every exercise in the book tries to use embodied cognition to unlock better behavior. Silent storytelling is a perfect example, the one I just explained. Another great one is in the posture chapter. People tend to go about posture in all the wrong ways. I'm sure you know a lot about this. And from the listening I've done to your pod, which I love, you touch on this sometimes, which is posture tends to be done from a standpoint of recruiting all the wrong muscles. Like stand up straight, and everyone tightens their lumbar like crazy and makes their cervical spine really tight, trying to achieve height. But actually, we are balanced beings when we use our body well. We're keeping our head aloft from ease and grace and balance and release, not from muscular effort. So in the chapter, what you do is you cut out a paper crown, and you kind of like those paper crowns. Well, I'm dating myself now, but I used to go to Burger King as a little kid. They had these paper crowns, okay? Yeah, same kind of idea. And you put this crown on, and then your job is to walk around the room visualizing that you are a monarch of some nation. And this tends to instantly inform people's bodies, and they begin to use their body differently, taller, more released. And what happens as soon as they do that, as soon as their head is taller, there's more room for their diaphragm to actually drop down. So they begin to breathe. And the breath is a thing that begins to unlock a much more embodied existence. Because when we're living from our neck up, we're not breathing. That's just one example.
Right. What about preparation, like warm-up exercises? It's, if I'm actually going to give a presentation, virtually or on stage, how do I effectively prepare for that?
The short answer is you should do a whole physical and a vocal warm-up, just like you're a communication athlete, because you are. And the warm-up has to involve three big things. One, your trunk. You're not warming up your ankles. That's not the primary muscle of communication.
Right.
So that means sun salutations and yoga moves and big full body torso stretching. Number two, the breath. And one of the easiest ways to do this is some yawning exercises. So yawn a whole bunch, let big yawn sighs out, meaning a sigh like you're sighing on a lazy Sunday morning. Blow some air through your lips, doing some lip trills. So you have to get the breath going. And then three, you have to warm up your enunciators. And you can also just think of the tongue twisters you've probably learned from, when you're a little kid.
Sally sells seashells by the seashore.
Exactly right. And you can do higher level of difficulty ones if you want to.
No, that's tough enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll give you one that is likely to lead to profanity if you're not careful. I will be very careful. This is a family-friendly podcast, folks. Here we go. I am a pleasant mother pheasant plucker. I pluck pleasant mother pheasants. I'm the best pleasant mother pheasant plucker who ever plucked a pleasant mother pheasant. You get the idea. Okay.
I'm not even going to try that.
But the point here is that
awesome.
Your body, every single Q&A you and I have been doing in this conversation, every single question and every response has been feeding back to this big idea that you're a communication athlete. It's a physical thing. You would never go do a extreme sport or something and not get your body limber and ready to go. Why would you think that you could give a big speech or a presentation and not have all the muscles of your enunciators firing dynamically?
Right.
So warm up.
Is there any reason to warm down or recover? You know, like musicians or singers, they need to really protect their voice.
Yes.
And so they take voice breaks and they rest it and they, they do things. What about just the average person who talks a lot?
Yeah. Unless you're trying to do a vocal health regimen, most people don't have to think about this that much. But yeah, if you're talking all the time, absolutely. And that can be quite simple. It's a series of gentle humming exercises. So you're just literally allowing your vocal cords to flutter with a lot of ease and recovery. Most people don't need this though, because they're not in the
I think
field
about
of
the
vocal
average,
performance.
Executive who's just so overcommitted and always giving speeches and always talking and always on.
Yeah.
And then they find themselves, like burned out and they lose their voice. This actually happened to me, I think in December. And it was definitely associated with some sort of low grade kind of bug or illness that I had, but I kind of started to lose my voice.
Yeah.
Remember that, Catherine? I was like, I could barely talk. And I thought maybe metaphysically it was just because I've been talking too much, right?
No,
and I just needed to talk less.
It's not because you were talking too much. No.
You don't think so?
No, I can prove it to you, okay?
Prove it.
Yeah, here you go. Here's a proof point. If you've ever been with a newborn who cries all night long and the next morning could still keep crying and could keep crying the next night too and could keep crying for 3 days.
Yeah, they're not going to burn out.
No, they're not. Because when we're a newborn, we have literally no tension. We're an open vessel. Breath comes into our body seamlessly. Our throat and vocal cords and entire communication architecture and equipment is completely relaxed. So it's almost like, blowing a horn. You could blow the horn forever as long as there was sufficient breath to go through it. As we grow, we accumulate a whole bunch of tension and habits and holding, a bunch of stuff from all the work you do on physical and also spiritual and mental health and things like that. So those layers tend to have physical manifestations, and we use our body in very different ways. So, long way of saying, if you lose your voice, it has everything to do with how you're producing that sound and much less to do with how much of the day you're talking. I mean, yes, it's true. If you say 30,000 words in a day, it is more wear and tear. But if you're doing it in a healthful manner, you really should be able to, at the end of the day, still wake up the following day and be able to speak more.
Right.
That's an aspirational goal, to be frank, because a lot of people they've acquired tendencies and habits that don't serve them. And this is not about judgment, folks. Industrialized society conspires to break, good use when it comes to speaking or to how we even use our bodies. Back to your question, though, for most people, if that's the case, the warm up is the very crucial part. The warm down is a little bit less essential.
Right.
And for people who don't have a experience of speaking so much that they lose their voices, I'll give you a different warm down activity. After you've done the big event or the big communication situation, reflect on it and reflect on one key place. If I messed up, would it have been the end of the world to just acknowledge it without apology? Don't apologize about it. Just acknowledge it and continue.
Hey, that didn't come out right, but hey.
Yeah.
Moving on.
That's right. That's right. And in the chapter on recovering from mistakes, I actually have these cards on the pages of the book that can be cut out that say things just like that.
Oh, yeah.
That's not what I meant. What I meant was, or, oh, I can't believe I forgot. I also want to say, or let me go back for a moment. Let me clarify that. Because so often we think we have to be flawless, and we don't. We should be flexible. And that gets to the very first thing you asked me about, which is, given the messages our society sends about being flawless, we all have this idea that we can never have a gaffe or a foible. And very often, not only can you, but what determines if you've reached your audience is not did you make a mistake, but how you handled that mistake when you made it. Because they're when, not if, they're going to happen.
I'm just in my mind reliving a time where as the words were coming out of my mouth, I realized how horribly wrong it was going. But I couldn't stop it because it was already in motion. And so there's no other, thing you can do really except for make fun of it. Make light of it.
Yeah.
Move on.
If you love almost impossible challenges, you've got great ambitions and unrelenting drive, and you love adventure, then guess what? You're not alone. I do too. And those of us who have those qualities also continuously strive for more. We refuse to stay where we are. For us, there's a vehicle called the Defender, engineered to meet challenges head on. The Defender family includes the Defender 90, the 110, and 130 models, each designed to exude confidence and capability. Whether you're exploring rugged terrain or navigating city streets, the Defender is fully equipped for 21st century adventures. With features like 3D surround cameras and clear sight rear view, you've got unparalleled visibility and control. The Defender 130 with its 8 seats offers ample space for family and friends to join your journey. Robust materials and modern design ensure durability and performance, making every drive an adventure. Explore with confidence, knowing you have the capability to tackle any path. So, if you're ready to embrace the impossible, explore the full Defender lineup at LandRoverUSA.com. LandRover USA.com. Design your adventure today with the Defender. I'm often on the move, traveling for business, speaking engagements, or other projects. But with the rise of online threats, protecting my digital footprint has become more important. To do that, I rely on NordVPN. NordVPN is a game changer for me. Not only does it allow me to securely access content from anywhere, but also protects my sensitive data like bank details and passwords. Whether I'm streaming my favorite show or watching live sports that aren't available in my region, NordVPN ensures I can do so without buffering or lag. A feature I appreciate a lot is called threat protection. This shields me from viruses and malware and phishing sites, giving me peace of mind when using public Wi-Fi. Plus, with NordVPN, I can save money by purchasing flights and subscriptions from countries with better deals. What's impressive is that one NordVPN account can secure up to 10 devices, making it a cost-effective solution for premium cybersecurity. And with this blazing fast speed, I can work seamlessly without interruption. So, if you're ready to safeguard your digital life like I am, visit nordvpn.com/markdivine. Again, nordvpn.com/markdivine, MARKDIVINE. Go there and check out the discounts on NordVPN plan. You'll receive extra 4 months on their 2-year plan. And with their 30-day money-back guarantee, there's no risk. The link is also available in the episode description box.
We can learn a lot from exemplars, right? And when we originally scheduled this, we were going to do it on or around Martin Luther King's, day.
Yeah.
And he is such an extraordinary, orator or communicator. What are some of the real key things that we can learn from how the strategies he used and how he communicated?
No one was better at weaving poetic devices into what he was doing. Imagery, metaphor,
right? Allegory,
allegory, yeah. Even just the poetry of language. So he would do this incredible thing that Herman Melville does in Moby Dick, where you have "Call me Ishmael," and then 3 sentences later, you've got an 87-word long sentence. King was brilliant at using incredibly simple phrases, and then immediately after, some huge aspirational, complex thought. So the audience feels smart and inspired at the same time. So they're hearts and minds are both activated in every darn speech. He was incredible about making the content about the people who are listening as opposed to himself. I mean, you could just go on and on and on. And then on the delivery side, talk about an exemplar. If everyone in the world can instantly do some impersonation of how someone speaks, and the whole flattery is or what is it? Impression is the sincerest form of flattery, or whatever the phrase is. Everybody could give a medium bad to good impersonation of Martin Luther King because he was that skilled. And if you think about those 5 P's of vocal variety, oh my gosh, watch the I Have a Dream speech and see for yourself. Just watch pace, pitch, pause, power, placement, and watch how he varies all of them. I have a dream. I mean, the pitch is the obvious one we all hear right away. The up and the down, because we don't use that much pitch in our day to day. That's the first one. But he plays with power. I have a dream. Like the volume of his voice varies dramatically. But even the placement, that's the one that's harder for people to recognize. But if you take, again, that you are a musical instrument, the sound amplifies in your body in different places, which is why when you have a cold, your voice sounds different because the sinuses are so clogged, sound can't amplify in the same way. That's why your voice sounds different, okay? He would allow the placement of his voice to entirely shift from the back of his throat all the way up to the front of his face. Like it would bounce around all the time. And the point is that when you use more vocal variety, well, hang on, caveat, it can go too far. We could talk about that. But for most people, it never goes far enough. When you use more vocal variety, and we've studied this, audiences evaluate you as more authentic. He was a master. He's as good as it gets.
Let's talk about the pause a little bit more, because I think people are uncomfortable in silence or in stillness. They feel like they've got to fill that space.
Yeah.
But then they're taking opportunity away from the listener to fill it themselves with curiosity maybe, or wonderment, or And so I think, and this goes in a broader context of storytelling, our culture has gotten a little bit watered down to where if you watch a typical Netflix show, there's no mystery left anymore. There's no boy, the audience is really smart and can figure this out for itself, so we're not going to tell them everything. You know what I mean? And I just turn shows off because I'm like, oh, where's the fun in this? The same thing with personal communication, right? And that's why the pause is so important.
What you're saying, there's a really discouraging detail in what you're saying. Let's talk about Netflix for a second. A friend of mine was a producer at ABC. I'll give him a shout out because why not? Pass credit along, right? Eric Ortega.
Oh yeah, Eric.
He taught me. Yeah, that's right. Good job, Eric. He taught me about what's called second screen. Do you know what second screen is?
I have not heard that. No.
A lot of Netflix shows are created for what's called second screen viewing because they know the audience is already scrolling and the TV is just on in the background. So the shows are dumbed down enough that you can mostly still follow even while you're also, look at that person posted. Oh, that's cool.
That is really disturbing.
Oh, wow, I hate that person.
Explains a lot. Holy cow.
Right? Exactly. Which I think is terrifying for us as communication beings. So part of what you're picking up on might be intentional because they're actually creating content that people can consume while multitasking.
Oh, wow.
Which, it's its own.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, I know. But to your bigger question about pausing, yes, pausing is essential. It's crucial. It's one of the 5 Ps, again, of vocal variety: pace, pitch, pause, power, and placement. And if you want to unlock this for yourself, I'll give you a really fun, intuitive way to think about why do humans pause? And it's so obvious when I say it. 1, you need to think of what word to say next.
Right.
Or 2, you want to give your audience time to digest what you've said. That's it. And part of that is when you give them time to digest, hopefully they have a moment potentially to contribute to the conversation too. Most people know this though. They know that pausing is important. The bigger question, and this is actually, by the way, the first skill building chapter in the book because it is such an important thing. The bigger question is, how do you pause? If you're not comfortable with silence, how do you learn how to do that behavior? And so in the book, you actually rip out a page and tear it into 6 strips. The drill is better done with Lego or Duplo blocks, actually, though, because they're more 3-dimensional and fun to use. But the idea is that you practice sharing one idea at a time, not 3 or 15 or 25, one. You can also think of it like a sentence. You pick up the strip of paper or the Lego block. You say your first idea or sentence. And at the end of the idea, kind of like where the period might go at the end of the sentence, you put the object down. Remain silent. Don't speak. Pick up the second block or strip of paper. Say the second idea. At the end of that idea, again, in silence, kind of like where the period might go at the end of the sentence, put the object down. If it's the Lego blocks, you click it in place. And you keep doing this, thought after thought after thought. And what happens is this everyday miracle occurs for people the first time they do the exercise, which is in that pause, they can finally do the thing that they know they should be doing, which is breathe and think. And so either they recognize, I'm done. I said all I needed to in 3 sentences, not 30. Or if they're not done, they can actually think of a smarter next thing to say. And you do this enough, and what happens is you build comfort with silence, and you build it in a physical way.
So you just literally dovetailed or double-clicked on one of the Navy SEALs' famous training acronyms or techniques. We call it PBTA. Pause, breathe, think, and then act.
Yeah.
And so that effect, I mean, the act of communicating comes after pause, breathe, think.
You are blowing my mind, because you could literally put those 4 letters on every darn Lego block or strip of paper, because you're exactly right. And the amazing thing is when you really practice this, you can unlock a bit of a flow state where those steps become incredibly quick. Once you're in a efficient flow of communication. Because think how quick your brain can sift through words and choose ideas, but it can't if it's not doing those stages. If it's just trying to look good or trying to not mess up or trying to create a good impression, it can't do that.
Right.
But go ahead,
the PBTA is just a functional version of another tool we use called the OODA loop. You've heard of the OODA loop?
No, educate me.
So OODA is an acronym because we love acronyms in the military for observe, orient, decide, and act. So observe, orient, and decide are more theoretical. So the SEALs say, well, how are we going to do that? We're going to pause. We're going to breathe. So that opens up the space so you can become more situationally aware. Then we're going to go into the thinking process. And then, obviously some methodologies or tools that help with effective thinking, right?
Yeah.
And only then when you can get through that process, you're going to act. But the idea is to practice it. So the OODA loop is meant to be, that's why you call it a loop. You observe, you orient yourself to what you observe. Based upon what you observe and your orientation to it, you make a decision. And then you act on it. And then you immediately go back and start observing it again. You see how did my words land? Or, how did this action affect the environment or the enemy in the case of the SEALs? And then you kind of keep going through that. And so your decision making becomes very agile and fluid, real time. And you practice that. It's going to be different for every, kind of unit. Like this was originally created by a guy named Colonel Boyd, who was a fighter pilot. And so this is like, you imagine aerial combat. It's very dynamic. And so the OODA loop has to be very, very quick. And the idea was you try to confuse the enemy so that it severs their OODA loop or stretches it out while yours remains really tight. And then you win. For the SEALs, the OODA loop is going to be, depending upon whether you're in an ambush or a firefight, it's going to be a little bit longer, but still pretty dynamic and rapid. Or you can look at it in terms of like longer term, strategically, always learning to learn about, how your actions, thoughts, decisions, communications is affecting your environment and the enemy, and how you're going to respond to that.
This is why I was so excited to have this conversation, because the things that you teach, that you've learned, that you're focused on, maybe even obsessed about in a positive way, they're the exact same things that I am, but in a very different field.
Right.
Because what you just described is what I call a different name in communication, the virtuous cycle of good communication. Because that loop of very rapid evaluation and action you just described is exactly what people do when they learn this exercise with the Lego blocks. And as opposed to being in a firefight, what they're doing is evaluating ideas to share. And the crazy thing about speaking is that you're talking about a very high stress, very dangerous situation, a firefight, or you're in a fighter plane in combat. Some speakers, when they're on stage in front of the big lights, they feel as though they are in a life and death situation. And so just as that loop helps train combatants, is that the right word? Combatants? Sure. Okay. Try combatants to be incredibly mindful and fast, though, with accurate, smart decision-making. We're doing the same thing for speaking.
Right.
But people can never do that if they don't actually slow things down and physically train. So they build muscle memory of doing basically that OODA loop, but about speaking.
That's cool.
You're the one who said that's cool. I didn't know about the OODA loop. That's the coolest thing. I'm going to start teaching the Lego drill now to people. Say this is the OODA loop, but for speaking.
Right.
Yeah.
We got to wrap up quickly here, but these three words have been burning a hole in my brain. And this was came from you, and it has to do with, I think, content delivery, but use of antithesis, assonance, and parable to create unforgettable messages. What are those, and how do we use them to create unforgettable messages?
Yeah. Well, let's reference back to Martin Luther King Jr., shall we? Because he's the best at all this stuff. These are poetic devices or poetical devices, and we used to study this in rhetoric, and we don't so much anymore. Alliteration is consonant sounds that are the same. So when I say I've created an alliterative system for vocal variety that is pace, pitch, pause, power, placement, the fact that those words all start with the letter P makes it alliterative. Assonance is repeated vowel sounds. So I'll give you another master beyond Martin Luther King. If you look at William Shakespeare, this just assonance and alliteration is littered through the complete works.
Interesting.
And then parable is a version of a story.
Can you give an example of assonance?
Yeah. In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. So all those vowel sounds in there. Ah, ah, ooh, ah, ah. Say again your seal call. What is it?
Hoo-yah.
Hoo-yah. So that is the opposite of assonance because you're two very different vowel sounds put right together.
Got it.
What happens when you hear these repeated sounds is it tends to create this kind of momentum and it moves an audience. If it's good enough for Shakespeare and good enough for Martin Luther King Jr.,
I'm just thinking how hard it would be to learn that because it's really not taught. I mean, that's the realm of poetry, really.
Yeah. The place you'll see it in the most everyday manner now is advertising copy. So just look at billboards. If you ride rapid transit in whatever city that you live in, look on the billboards and signs on rapid transit. It's all over the place. You'll begin to see it everywhere. Why? Because it's catchy. And the company or advertiser wants you to have that stuck in your head. But people can use it for speaking as well. And the way I would suggest that people begin to encounter this is just begin to notice it in the world around you. Don't even try to adopt it yourself. Just begin to notice it. Same vowel sounds, same consonant sounds. Another thing you could do is crack open any play by William Shakespeare and read a couple of pages, and you're going to find a bunch of examples of it.
Right. And parable seems to me to be the ability to communicate a complex idea through a very simple to understand story.
Yeah.
And this also reminds me of something I learned from my friend Bo Eason, who does communication or storytelling. He says that the personal is the general. And what he meant by that is if I have a story of some challenge I overcame or some suffering that I endured, right? It's not unique to me. So tell my story and everyone else will learn the lesson that they need to learn from it. I don't have to translate what they need to know from the story. So too many speakers and too much in communication, and we addressed this a little earlier, try to spell out the lesson for the individual as opposed to telling the story and letting the individual discern their own lesson.
Yeah.
And that's what the parable was. And to keep it simple.
Yes.
I mean, that was what one of the, when I think about Jesus of Nazareth, his teachings were extraordinary, because if he had tried to, explain some of the really complex things that he was teaching in the language of, the day, then his people wouldn't have understood it.
Nor would it stick around 2,000 years later.
That's right. So he had to parabolize it.
Yeah.
If that's a word. It is now.
You just made a word up, just like Shakespeare.
Exactly.
Funny thing was, the hotel I was in last night had a book. It was just in the room for some reason, it was the teachings of the Buddha. And I would say the exact same thing. Incredibly simple teachings, usually built into stories or parables and things like that. And you're exactly right. And I would go even further than your friend Bo, which is, yes, he's right about all that. I would even suggest that it's hardwired into us.
Mm-hmm.
Communication is our superpower. If you read the book Sapiens by Yuval Harari, thank you. He talks about how this development of incredibly complex and agile communication allowed us to outcompete other hominids.
Right.
Because we're able to use story and spoken communication to create a tribe. And a bigger tribe and a team. And then eventually...
most people think it's the use of tools and the opposing thought. Right. No, it's actually the ability to communicate, which then allowed us to go from me to us.
That's exactly right.
Right.
So the storytelling, which activates empathy, which activates relatability, I would suggest it's hardwired into us.
Interesting.
That we gain motivation and commitment from hearing others share.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Anything else from the book? We got to wrap up soon, but... Don't say how to communicate effectively to live a better life.
Yeah, sure. So here we go.
Master.
Ask me a habit or two that people might not like that they have, and I'll teach you a drill how to change it. On the delivery side. So let's stick to delivery.
Sure. A specific habit, or just like ask what's a habit or two that people might want to change?
Yeah, either one. Well, I'll take the bait. All right, here's a good one. You ready? Eye contact. If you know that you struggle at times with eye contact, don't keep beating yourself up about that. Instead, grab a wiffle ball and practice with a friend. And at the end of each sentence, you have to throw a ball to the friend so they can catch it. Grab a couple friends, use eye contact to indicate to them you're going to throw a ball to them in a second. This turns eye contact into a game, because you have to be looking at them so you know they're ready to catch the ball, and they have to look at you to prepare to catch the ball.
That's cool.
That's an example. Stance. Let's say you know you have wandering feet when you're on stage. Don't just tell yourself, stop shuffling my feet, stop pacing, stop shuffling, stop pacing. That's not going to work. That's
Practice
thought suppression.
standing.
Yeah. And in the book, you actually, in the stance chapter, I have people lay the book flat, and there's two silhouettes of feet there.
Yeah.
Stand on the book and just focus on keeping the pages of the book adhered to the ground.
This is really interesting, because I learned also recently that where your feet are pointed matters to the audience. So for instance, if we're sitting and my feet are like pointed out like this, that's noticed, right? And it's sending some sort of message, right? That I'm not really focused on them. There's something going on, right? Or if they're all kind of cattywamped. And so when you're standing or sitting and you're communicating, to point your feet toward the audience.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? I don't know what the psychology is behind that. But
Yeah. Well, let's anchor it to something you know really, really well. If you were in some kind of, let's make it friendly combat, like a martial arts practice or something.
Right.
And you were going to spar with an opponent, you would do that automatically.
Foot placement is really important.
Right?
Yeah,
and they would
sure.
be facing forward underneath you, balanced as well as possible, not because you were thinking about how the audience was perceiving you, but because that is going to allow you to move dynamically and safely as quickly as possible.
Right.
And again, the idea here is reinforcing communication is not you just thinking smart stuff. It's you unlocking this positive, virtuous cycle of good communication in which those smart thoughts can be shared with other people via the physical act of speaking.
You know, the exercises that you talked about today, obviously they're powerful if done as an individual, but you also talked about a few kind of partner exercise or even group exercise. I imagine, having a like what I would call a training team, right, for communication would be really powerful, right? So if you you got some friends and you're all working on becoming public speakers or better communicators, how cool would it be to get a group together and once a week, start drilling?
Yeah.
Do you have any workshops, by the way, like that? Because that
Sure.
would be... Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. You can just go to my company's website, gktraining.com, and we lead that kind of thing all the time. We have online courses people can take. So yes to all the stuff you're saying. And I will even go further, which is I'll give the audience some very good news and also some very bad news. And I mean them both with 100% honesty. The very good news is if you read this book and use this book, it will change your life. That's why the subtitle is How to Communicate Effectively to Live a Better Life. That's not hyperbole. It's true. Here's the bad news. If you don't read the book and use the exercises and practice the exercises, it won't do a darn thing.
Right. That's
the same thing as exercising.
Theory to practice leads to mastery.
That's right.
But the practice is the key.
That's right. So if you read these exercises, cool, that's amazing. Wiffle ball, stand on the book, stack some Lego blocks, but you never do them, you will get Zippola out of this book. So to your point, when do people get better at sticking with some discipline and some practice? With support. So yeah, build a team. And in fact, in the chapter on building a practice regimen of some sorts, I suggest that. Grab an accountability partner or a buddy or even a small group. Do a book club to go through the book together. Or yeah, if people want to, work with us and get a course or a group workshop, you absolutely can. gktraining.com.
You've worked with a lot of folks and coached a lot of folks on this. What's the most valuable thing that we could do starting today to improve our communications?
Yeah. I would legitimately, even before you buy the book, if you buy the book, just take one of the it's not one of the chapters, one of the exercises I talked about and try it. Literally, as soon as this podcast is done,
no, but
try
isn't
the
there
exercise.
like a common theme where we got to start here? Like this is the most valuable thing you do, or is it different?
No, the reason I say it is because the first thing, kind of like what's the loop that you talked
OODA
about?
loop,
Yeah, the OODA loop. The first thing is your job is to experience, holy cow, by doing this one small physical intervention, I can begin to unlock a positive feedback loop. So the point is start anywhere, use any one of them. In fact, so if you know you speak too quickly, do the finger walking exercise. If you know you ramble, try the Lego block. If you have a problem with shuffling your feet, stand on a book. Because what you want to do today is begin to experience, wow, this can be changed. And that actually incentivizes people to learn. It's kind of the same as, let me put the question to you. I'm not in the greatest physical fitness right now for a variety of reasons that we spoke about earlier. I'm not going to get into that right now. If I said to you, what can I do today to begin to improve? What would you tell me?
Just start doing burpees.
There you go. It's the exact same thing. So the burpee of communication.
The burpee will tell you everything.
That's right. The burpee of communication.
To be fair, I would assess you and determine, your dysfunctional patterns and where your issues are, and then design a program that's customized for you.
As I would too.
Yep.
But you asked me a slightly different question, which is I can't magically beam myself into tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of different places all at the same time.
Right.
So if you weren't there to evaluate a person, they had listened to this pod or they had read something that you've produced, what would you have them do?
Yeah. I would say do a burpee and send me a video.
Exactly
and I can
right.
learn everything I need from that.
That's exactly right. So the same thing here. So use a Lego drill that I explained earlier, or do one of these exercises and take a video and send me a video. Exact same thing.
Interesting. Awesome. Michael, thanks so much for joining me today, and thanks for coming in person.
Yeah.
It's a big haul from Connecticut.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Enjoy your time out here in San Diego, away from the snow.
It's fun to have a face-to-face conversation.
No
my
doubt.
pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hoo-yah.
Hoo-yah indeed. Or rather, hoo-yah.
Hoo-yah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
When I can get 200 or 300 people to shout that from their belly.
Yeah.
Oof,
Whoa.
pretty
Well,
powerful.
wait a minute. Let's do something then. Let's do something. Everybody, if you're in a private place, and it's not going to be
Driving your
weird.
car.
I'm completely serious. Wherever you are, if you're private, we're going to all say this phrase on the count of 3. But when we say it, you're not going to say it in a limit like, ooh, yeah. You're not going to say it in a limited way. You're going to use all of your physical and vocal communication instrument to turn air into sound and sound into words, which is the everyday miracle of speaking. So can you teach the audience again, what's the exact sound again?
Hoo-yah.
Great.
Hoo-yah.
Yeah, like that. So on the count of 3, everybody, We're going to say this. Are you ready for this? You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. On the count of three.
26,000
If you're listening and you're in a public position, you don't have to do it. Okay. But if you're private, you have to do this right now. On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Hoo-yah! Everybody feel better already? What you just did was activate your physical and vocal communication instrument. And you can do that all day long, every day, and get better and better and better.
Amen to that.
Thank you for joining us on the Mark Divine Show. We hope this podcast has enriched your life as well as encouraged you to think from new perspectives and make actionable change. You can find all the resources from this episode on the website markdivine.com, along with the video version on the YouTube channel. Just search Mark Divine. You can also connect with Mark Divine directly on Twitter X, Instagram, Facebook, or you can also reach out if you want to share ideas, bring up topics you'd like to hear Mark discuss, or any guest suggestions via his LinkedIn page, Mark Divine. A big thanks to our amazing team at Jet Studios, bringing this podcast to you every week. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the Divine Inspiration newsletter. You can go to markdivine.com and subscribe there. Check out Mark's new performance-focused supplements at sealfitsupplements.com. If you are a new or regular listener to the Mark Divine Show, we would be so grateful if you could rate and review the show. It helps with visibility, and it also gets us out there to more people that are wanting to be positive change agents in this world. Remember, you have the power to create change you want to see. So let's all strive for a better world as trailblazers and warriors of positive change. Stay inspired, stay curious, and be uncommon. Thank you.